Hey.
Hello.
Hey, how's it going?
Fine. How are you?
Good, thank you. Good, thank you. It's very windy here, so I'm trying not to go outside.
Yeah, I saw this coming. It will reach Germany today, I think, the stormy weather.
Oh,
So
right, yeah.
thank you for that.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Hello.
Good morning.
Good morning. Cool. So, let's begin. Skarbek, I'll hand it over to you.
So I wanted to try to see if I couldn't demo what logs look like before and after a change to pre-prod. As you all know, logs look like complete garbage coming out of our services in Kubernetes. And this is due to the fact that we use tail or xtail, which simply follows our logs, and it follows a directory of logs. So anytime it changes which file it's describing, it outputs that file name and then outputs the actual log data. And then prior to logging the name of the file, it drops an empty line. Tail is meant for the command line. It's meant for you to see stuff locally. It's meant for you to say, hey, tail this log file, show me the data on the screen. It's not meant for consumption into Elasticsearch. So we're abusing a tool and it works fine. Don't get me wrong, like it does its job, but the logs just don't look great. So this recent change is supposed to make it easier by using a tool called Gitlab Blogger. This tool was initially created by someone outside of GitLab. We have since taken it over and pulled it into our own tooling, and distribution has made it a part of our component tree so that when enabled, I can't find these logs. When enabled, it comes to Elasticsearch as structured logging and has a bit of metadata so that we know what log date or what log message it actually, like which log it came from. So it was just merged. So I'm trying to, here, I'll share my screen while I struggle to find things. Maybe one of you guys could help me look at things a lot quicker. But I'm looking at Rails in pre. I'm kind of pre-assuming that it was enabled perfectly fine without issue. What I'm expecting to see is that we should see perfect. So we see a new object called subcomponent so that we know that this particular log message came from production JSON log file, which is great because now we have stuff like the readiness is already inside of its own object, in this case, JSON.path. So I know that it's working. Component is GitLab. I don't know what that entirely means. So we have log data and it looks like it's supposed to an extent. I'm guessing that's supposed to be empty. We will need to re-index that our fields are searchable, which is fine. So I could do that at a later point in time. Web exporter. Subcomponent. So yeah, so our logging is working as desired. The message comes through the entire thing. So we have some items that are still not like structured. Like I would have expected to see JSON.path equal to / metrics here. But I think because this is coming from a different log that's not JSON structured, we're still losing some of that information. So that was JSON.message. What are these empty ones? They're not going to have a message field because they're structured logs. Okay, so that makes sense to me. What else do I want to potentially look at here? Something that always irked me was that we would always get the log of the file name. Here, let me actually go back in time a little bit. Because it was just merged and deployed, so go. So we should see our old logging style here. Like we're missing the component name, which is what we want now. Let's look at JSON. I shouldn't have gotten rid of that JSON, that message. Oh, here's a perfect one. This is what I don't want to see. You see that it's outputting the log file. So this is JSON.message. It's outputting the log file that it's reading from, which we don't want. And then you'll notice some of these have blank lines. Like the ones with hyphen, they don't have the attribute JSON.message. The ones with blank lines, we should no longer see. And the reason they're blank lines is, like I said, tail will output a blank line prior to going to the next file that it's outputting data for. So, you know, we're receiving all of this data for blank message into Elasticsearch. So that adds a lot of unnecessary data to Elasticsearch. And, you know, it's hard to search and exclude this because of the way KQL works. So hopefully that goes away. So it looks like Rails is working as desired. So this is supposed to impact all of our services. Come on, dude. So I would expect the same to be seen in Sidekick as well and Workhorse. So Workhorse and pre. I'll need to reindex all of these. There's a lot of new messages. So do we have component in here? Subcomponent rather? I don't see it. Oh no, Workhorse is not impacted. It's not using Gitlab Blogger. Workhorse is already outputting structured logs only. So sorry, I was incorrect. Sidekick. And there was another one. What was the third one? Gitlab Shell was the other one. Okay, so, oh, perfect. So this is a log message that we need to somehow avoid. Jarv determined that this is output so often in production that we add 6 whopping megabytes of unnecessary data. Stan looks to be forking the project that is refusing to fix this quickly and bringing that
he's
into
got
the
his
GitLab
MR
project.
open,
Yeah,
so
yeah.
hopefully being merged soon.
So I'm expecting to see subcomponent in here as well, which I do not for some reason. So that's perfect. That's great. That gives me something to look into, which is irritating. But Sidekick wasn't always pretty disgusting because the logs didn't change often. Like we had a lot of log files, but not really sure what to look for inside of Sidekick logs. But do we have subcomponent on here? No, we don't. Okay. So I might need to look into why Sidekick, like we do have some new stuff because they're all unindexed. So something is different. Okay, so the last one I want to look.
Skarbek, were you expecting to look at the pre-log? Because maybe you were looking, you thought you were looking at another instance.
I'm looking at pre.
This is pre-prod. Okay, so you were, okay.
Yeah, I only enabled it in pre-prod for the time being. So GitLab Shell was the last one I want to look at. Where is Shell? Pre. Okay. Cool. Okay, so we're obviously there's more work to look into before I close this issue. I don't know why there's no logs for GitLab Shell. I also know that the team members and observability have been messing with logs as well lately, so it may just be a clash of me working alongside them with this particular change, but I'm not really sure what else to showcase because it was literally just merged, so I need to go back and look at it, but that concludes my demo. I know it wasn't exciting, and my apologies, but the goal here was to see if GitLab Blogger is working for us today and not causing issues, with the goal that it improves log data and searchability inside of Elasticsearch. I'll do a more thorough analysis outside of this meeting, so I'm not wasting the time in here.
Nice. Thanks for sharing that, Skarbek. Can you just summarize like what did you change? Like I know I can read the MR, but like just for the demo, like what was the change you merged in?
The change was a simple environmental variable. The GitLab Blogger is enabled via an environment variable that gets sent to our containers upon startup. Otherwise, it'll default to falling back to, or excuse me, the default is to use tail or xtail depending on the component or depending on the container. But this is using the GitLab Blogger that distribution is now maintaining.
Nice.
So this
Cool.
is beneficial. So from a technical standpoint, we're unblocked, but I would like to complete a little bit more thorough analysis before I'm confident with that. And the last thing we need to deal with is the immense logging from the URL obsolete message, which we already know that we need to handle in some way, shape, or form. So whether that gets merged prior to us going to production, or whether I figure out how to create a filter in FluentD, that way it just drops that specific message. It's a race to figure out who can finish that first, I guess.
Nice. Sounds good. Thanks for demoing that. Cool. So should we move to discussion items?
Sure. So I've cleaned up the API epic, and I started touching the Sidekick epic. I'm not exactly sure what else I need to add to that epic at the moment in time, but I created boards. Well, boards kind of already existed. I just made it more, I advertise them now. So the work on these boards, in my mind, is prioritized appropriately, and everything should be in the necessary columns that I feel like they should be, whether they're ready or in triage or in progress or what have you. So I'm hoping this will be a good place that we could utilize to figure out what work we should pull next for whoever wants to work on Kubernetes related items for these two topics. Sidekick is a little light on issues because it's one of those things where you're not going to know what the next issue is until you complete the evaluation. So I didn't want to waste my time trying to be like, oh yeah, next batch, move to production, because I figured we would just create a change request for that. So there's that.
Yeah, that makes
just
sense.
enabled the Prometheus scraping of NFS metrics, right?
Saw that.
And we can see that we have a lot of queues still sending NFS, requesting NFS.
Have you already looked at that data? I haven't looked at it yet.
I just looked at the, when I merged it, I looked into the Thanos graph for that, and it looked like a lot of queues are showing up there, still using NFS.
You want to,
like
do you
a lot
still
of-
have that tab open by chance? Why don't we look at it together?
Come again?
Do you still have that tab open? I'm curious as to what that looks like.
Let me check if I still have it open. I think so. Yes. No,
Go ahead, share your screen, man. I'm curious.
I think I have 20 different tabs related to this one, but
I'm pretty sure everyone on this call has at least 20 tabs related to the same
yeah.
thing they're working on.
Let me see if I can find it again, maybe. And share my screen.
I'll do the same. I'll race you. Okay, you already beat me.
So just need to remember the name of the metric. And was something with NFS. How did we call it? NFS export? No. Do you know how we called this metric?
Hey, I'm
Did we get from
trying
the
to,
NFS metric
I'm trying to
scraping
pull up
tool?
the I'm trying to pull up the query. Give me a second.
Okay.
Okay, I got it if you want me to share my screen instead.
Yeah, or just tell me the name.
I'll
can
just
just
share
stop.
my screen.
Okay.
Share, and then we'll just limit this to GPRD.
NFS monitor, okay.
So yeah, there's quite a few. So Pages is still making calls. So we see Pages update configuration is still making NFS calls.
But the frequency is very low, right? I mean,
Oh yeah, the frequency is a lot less than expected, which is really good. I'm curious as to why group SAML group sync is, that's also a weird name for a queue, but that's making NFS calls. Cron job user status cleanup batch. Pages is still showing up here. So we still issue rebalancing. What is issue rebalance? What do you do when you rebalance an issue?
I think that's about the IDs, because I think in some way we can overflow the number of IDs that we reserved or something like that. And I think there's something which is,
goodness,
in this case, trying to rebalance this, if I remember correctly. So we have a sidekick job which is taking care if we have too many issues in a project, then we could reach an ID number which is getting too high. So we need to rebalance for some reason. Forgot the details, but sounded interesting.
For some reason, the performance bar is writing to shared storage. That's a little weird. GitHub
Maybe it's just looking it up.
What's this purple one? GitHub importer.
Also, there could be some things which are just running weekly or monthly, which are hard to track here, maybe.
Are we looking at read access or write access, or both of them?
This is any NFS access being called upon. We don't care what it is, but if you're doing anything NFS related,
so if you're listing a directory, it will show up here.
Precisely.
So I think that some of this could also be some kind of stat or LF or LS, because what I'm thinking is maybe at some namespace level or group level, there may be some kind of operation that checks something, and then they they may try locally or remotely.
But we do have some that are at a rate of 0 or not a number. So we do have some metrics that are being gathered for items that we could potentially move. So I think we have enough information where we have a whole list we could go through. And for any that are recording 0 or not a number for a lengthy period of time, we could probably proceed to move those over to Kubernetes. For the rest of these, we should go through and log issues for to figure out what they're doing and reach out to the appropriate team to figure out what we need to accomplish to get rid of any shared storage on these things. I do know that the issue is still open for removing some stuff related to NFS. So maybe there's some queues that are still doing some work that are behind a feature flag, because I think there's a feature flag that needs to be set to fully disable the NFS calls. But there's like 4 or 5 issues all related to that work. So it's kind of, unless I read through every single, I did not read through every single one of them. So I don't know what the status of all that work in general is, but I know it's still a work in progress.
Yeah, it has. I can find out for you, but like, yeah, it's still there. I think the migration finished, but I don't think they've done the final switch off just in case they need to go back. So
yeah,
I could dig that up. Do we know why there are so many queues? I mean, I know the answer to this is no. We don't know why, but like, there's a lot more here than we saw last year, right? Is that correct?
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that because I distinctly recall creating a list of everything that was left running on these nodes and creating an issue for all the ones that I saw were problematic, and I was migrating all the rest off. So I don't
Because
know.
when developers don't follow the documentation on how to classify and add the queue, everything ends up in the catch-all queue. So that is almost
the
a
VMs are
shame
default.
list of people who didn't read where their queue needs to end up. So they didn't classify what their queue requires resource-wise, whether it's CPU intensive, whether it's memory intensive, and so on. So yeah, that is
That's
likely the reason.
That's reasonable. Like, fault for engineers, that's fine. But like, there should have only been like less than 10 queues running in Sidekick. Did we really add nearly 100+ queues in the last
There
3
is
months?
a proposal in the scalability team to completely revamp this again, because these like the high number of queues is actually causing huge Redis issues.
Yeah.
So this is architecture problem. Unfortunately, this was a workaround for another workaround that allowed us to breathe for a year and a half. So I think we have already planned this in scalability. However, again, priorities, and because it's major surgery, we're not tackling it until we have to.
Yeah. I do think we have the information necessary that we can continue forward with a batch 7 evaluation and go ahead start moving stuff over. It's just a matter of doing the work.
Awesome. Sounds good. So that's something which I'm going to ask Graham to see if he can have a go at when he joins us next week.
Okay. I'll try to provide as much guidance as I can on the issue. That way we don't stray away from our goals here.
Super. Thanks for that, Skybuck.
So many queues. So my next bullet point item, I already discussed this with Amy and Marin, but I'm hoping that we could still work on both of these things at the same time. So my goal here, just to reiterate this in the meeting, was I would help Henry, I'm hoping you and I could work on the API together. And then I would also work on the Sidekick work and work with Graham on that particular work. Are there any qualms with that? Any questions? Like I'm trying to get organized. That way we're all on the same page, but I'm just curious if there's anything I need to be aware of or anything. I don't know.
There's nothing, like there's no dependency between API work and Sidekick work, right? They're independent. They just need to be done, right?
Yep.
Yeah, nice. That sounds like a great idea. Henry, do you know how much registry work you've got coming up in the next few days?
Good question. So I created a lot of MRs today, which should help to get the first iteration of a registry DB out. So once they are merged, I get the secret that I need for configuring Kubernetes to actually be configured to use the registry DB. So then if that works, then I would be done with the first step, and we would need to see how we can get access for the developers to this node, to the DB. But they already have more plans, right? They wanted to have a second registry instance and things like that. So need to see.
We should work out the plans for that. Yeah. So, but in terms of this step, so at the moment, Pre is almost got a database, and you did the connection as well, did you, with the charts change that came in? Yeah,
that's a thing that I wanted to get ready, but I first need to get the Terraform MR merged, because that will generate the database secret, and that then I can take and put it into the Kubernetes charts configuration. And then we can see if registry really is able to use it, if it works. But I need to first merge the Terraform MR. But yesterday, Skarbek helped me to get the charts config right. So I think it should work once I get the secret.
Nice. Okay, sounds good. Great. So yeah, we need to work out what the next steps are for deploying registry. So hopefully that means we'll be able to make a bit more progress on the API migration in the meantime. So. Fantastic. So on the blockers list, like, there's not too much to talk about really. Like the blockers are all moving along pretty nicely at the moment, which is super. The only one I did want to maybe talk about was the set the different shutdown blackout seconds for different deployments. So a change has been merged in. I'm wondering, do we actually have some follow-up work that we need to now plan out to actually make use of this setting?
It's just a matter of upgrading our chart and then determining what value to set this to. I think to start, we'll probably just set it to something similar to our VMs, which I think is 5 seconds. I'd have to relook because I can't remember for sure. And then just do a suite of testing during deploys just to make sure that we're not throwing awkward errors and cutting connections unnecessarily. We don't have an issue, or do we have an issue for that?
I don't think so. There was an issue, I think this was the one actually about setting it.
Well, you linked to the chart issue, but do we have an issue to bring this or evaluate this ourselves?
No, I don't think so.
We have an issue to investigate the time it takes for an API service to deploy, issue 1603. So I think we could just tackle that issue. Is also very light on details. So I think we should just tackle that during that issue. Oh, you created this issue, Amy. Look at you.
So this one is a kind of, like, we can definitely put them together. That one is that's after we've done the migration, make sure we have a bit of a view of how much time, hopefully some time, has been cut off deployments. But yeah, absolutely fine if you want to add this piece on.
Yeah, like as far as issue titles go, it's the perfect place for it. So I'll modify the issue description on this to account for this change.
Nice, thank you. Cool. Great, that's the end of our agenda. Is there anything else anyone wants to discuss? Demo, question? Good stuff.
Amy, if there's... Never mind, I see some feedback on my merge request. Never mind.
Do you want to, Scarlett, do you want to talk to us about the change you made for deploying Kubernetes and using the cached, the cached charts? I don't know what the words are. What was the change you made yesterday following the incident?
Well, firstly, the problem. During an incident, GitLab pages was down. Because of that, our Helm chart still has a dependency on GitLab pages because we need to bring in the GitLab runner chart. And that's hard-coded inside of our chart. I don't think there's a way to override that at all. If there is a way, I don't know about it. So we had a problem where the build would occur, and because it couldn't gather its dependencies, it would fail. Previously, our chart was being built for every pipeline. That was an improvement over the prior problem where it was being built for every job. The change that I made was to create an artifact and store it. That way it could be used for the rest of that pipeline. And now we've further improved that where it will create the artifact, store it, and if there's an existing artifact that matches, it'll pull that artifact down, validate it's the right version, and utilize that instead of trying to build it first. If it fails to pull down the right version, it'll proceed to build. That's a little goofy because what it ends up doing is pulling down something that's already built and it restores it again as a new artifact, but I think that's a minor detail.
Yeah, I mean, I'm assuming it's not a huge thing, right? So, yeah.
We don't account for artifacts, right? So no one is counting it.
And technically, I don't know how GitLab handles this in the back end, but like the name of the artifact remains the same. So I would hope that it's just simply overwriting the same artifact over and over again, but I don't know that for sure. It's always pulling from the master branch, and it's always going to pull the latest artifact from the master branch, and it's then going to validate that the SHA of the package that we built matches the SHA that we provide as the chart version on that pipeline. That's the validation we use to determine whether or not it should rebuild or not. And if it fails to pull for any reason at all, like if the curl fails or like the API does something goofy for a split second, it'll build the chart for us and store it again. I think the only caveat with this one is if we decide to upgrade the chart in one environment instead of all environments, we'll have a little goofy situation where the version of our charts will appear to change in that environment in a very awkward way. Currently, the version we set is GitLab -0.0.0 plus the SHA. But if we, for some reason, need to build the chart for a specific environment, the version is going to change to whatever the latest version is stored of that chart at that moment in time. So like we're at version 4.5, I think, .0. So we'll see version 4.5.0 be changed in like every object inside of Kubernetes. Being that it's only a version change to the annotations, I think that's a minor discrepancy that we don't really need to worry about. It will make the deployment slightly longer because it modifies every single object that has that version in it. But again, like I'm not terribly worried about that.
Nice. Sounds good. Sounds good. Are there any, if there's any kind of things that we are in 6 months' time going to be question marks over, maybe just jot some notes down in a guide or something like that. Like, let's write those thoughts down so that we can remember them. But yeah, it sounds like a better place anyway. So that's good.
I've got some of that in the README.
Perfect. Yeah, great. Nice. Cool. Is there anything else anyone wants to go through today? No?
I don't have anything.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for the demos and discussions. So enjoy the rest of your day. Right. Take care.
Have a good one.
Bye.